Today on BRStv, we have a quick how-to on upgrading your Tunze Osmolator with the Tunze water valve 8555.200. Hi, I'm Ryan, your host of BRStv, where each week we cover a new topic related to reefing. This week we're going to replace the feed pump that comes with your osmolator with the water valve, which is basically a solenoid valve with quarter-inch connections. Installing the water valve is easy as removing the wires that are attached to your pump from the osmolator and inserting the wires that are connected to the solenoid. The next step is somewhat optional. Inside the box you'll find a potentiometer or a dial that can be set anywhere from nano to max. This is normally used to set the flow rate of the pump that comes with the osmolator. The default setting is in the middle and will work for the water valve, but for optimal performance the manufacturer recommends setting it on max. There are two common ways to use the water valve: connected to a reservoir or directly to a water source like an RODI system. First one is installing it inline between a freshwater storage container and your tank or sump. Installed like this, the valve will open when the osmolator is triggered by a low water sensor. There are a handful of ways to make sure this is done safely. Just like everything else in the tank, on a long enough timeline, everything fails. There are a few ways to implement backups, and combined together make the risk almost non-existent. First one is simply size the freshwater storage container so even a complete failure wouldn't permanently harm the tank or flood onto the floor. Every system is different, but a 10-gallon container on a 100-gallon tank probably wouldn't have any lasting effects on the tank, and most sumps could hold that much extra water. Second, you can add a valve to the end of the outlet to slow water flow. The osmolator is open for a minimum of 20 seconds and a maximum of 10 minutes. At 10 minutes, it assumes sensor failure, shuts down permanently, and flashes an alarm to let you know. The system needs to be unplugged to be reset, so you can set a flow rate which makes sense for your system. Third, install a float valve on the outlet. This should be installed just above the water level and slightly above where you install your osmolator water level sensors. It should only be used in case of a complete system failure. I would also use a fixed float rather than an adjustable version, so there isn't risk of the wing nut getting bumped loose. Okay, on to the more interesting install where you never have to haul another bucket of top-off water in your life. We're going to hook up the RO system directly to the tank. There are two considerations to this. First, the RODI system is going to be turned on and off for short periods, and it won't operate the most efficiently because of TDS creep, so you will consume DI resin faster this way. Pretty much an individual cost-benefit equation. Second, you're connecting a never-ending water supply to your tank, which is not only a risk to your tank, but also your home. We can't eliminate this risk entirely, but we can reduce it to a point that most people would be willing to accept it. We're going to do this with 3 steps. First, we're going to rely on the osmolator's normal safety features: the initial optical eye for water level monitoring, the backup emergency float valve, and an internal 10-minute limiter. A typical 75-gallon per day RO system will emit a half a gallon of water in 10 minutes, so the internal timer is a very effective backup. The rest of the backups are designed more around solenoid or rare complete system failures. First obvious one is installation of a float valve. Again, we suggest using the non-adjustable versions, which have a lower risk of failure, and install it above the osmolator's standard sensors. Second one is installing a leak detector like this one on the RODI line. It comes with a sensor that lays flat on any surface near the tank or sump and detects moisture. If it's triggered, it closes a valve, shuts off the water supply, and sets off an audible alarm. Third is a leak detector has the ability to daisy chain multiple sensors, but you can also use this feature to daisy chain a float switch to the initial moisture probe. We suggest using a horizontal float and installing it to the side of the sump just above the float valve. If everything failed, the float would rise and trigger the leak detector. Installed like this, we have a total of 4 sensors located outside and inside the tank: a true solenoid valve, a secondary shutoff valve, and a float valve. Well, nothing in life is risk-free. I personally feel this arrangement is safe for my tank in-house. We did have a few final tips. Solenoid valves will last a lot longer if they're installed after the DI stage of your system because calcium and other elements can deposit on the valve and ruin it. For the same reason, you should never use a solenoid valve on a solution used to dose kalkwasser. Lastly, if you have a huge tank, the osmolator's internal 10-minute timer might be an issue. If that's the case, consider adding a 150-gallon per day upgrade to your RO system so it produces water faster. Lastly, if you own a controller like the Neptune 8-Packs, you can also install a leak detector or float switch to set off an audible alarm, shut off a second solenoid, as well as notify you of the situation. If you have any questions about the proper use of the water valve 855.200 or advice for other reefers, check out the comments area down below. If this is your first time with us, hit that subscribe button because we release 2 new reefing videos every week. See you next week with another episode of BRStv.